Hello, it's Shari here today, and I am going to be making this Flippin Awesome Yeti card. So we're going to start by stamping out all our images from the Yeti or Not set. I've got a piece of cardstock cut in half, and I'm just going to have to stamp out a whole bunch of images to make all these little scenes. So I've just loaded it in my Misty, and I'm just going to stamp all my images on this one sheet of paper. So I'm just going to move these stamps around as I go. You could also cut one little piece of paper and then not have to move your stamps and stamp the same images in the same spot on each sheet. Just whatever works for you. I thought this would make the best use of my paper. So I'm going to be stamping out, you need 5 Yetis for this, 5 snowboards, well actually not 5 snowboards, but 5 of the things that you're going to use on all the panels. That includes the in panel. So now that I've got it all stamped out, and they're stamped out in jet black ink on white cardstock, I can do some coloring with my Copic. So I'm going in with the N1 gray here. So this is a light gray. And I'm just going to go around the edges of his face and the edges of his body, doing a flicking motion from the outside to the inside. This will give him some shading and not make him look quite so stark white. Now I'm going to go in with my blender pen, which I had a little bit of leakage in my cap. Not sure what was going on there, but the marker seemed to be okay. So I'm just going to go in with that colorless blender and pull that N1 light gray towards the middle a little bit and kind of blend it out. Now I've got my N4, which is a darker gray, and I'm just going to color his little horns and his little hands. Now to color his face, I have some very light E's here, so this is an E000. I'm just going to go all over with this one, trying to avoid his little teeth. And then I've got an E00 that I'm going to use to kind of highlight the outside and sort of pull that in just to give him a little more definition on the outside of his face. And then I'll just blend that back out with E000. So moving on to some of the other items, I am going to color the snowboard with a teal with a pink stripe down the center. And then for the popsicles here, I've got a V12. I'm just going to go over it with the color all over, and then I'm going to come back in and add some shading just using the same marker, just another layer of it. And you can see I've got one popsicle without a bite in it. That's for our first panel. And I'm just going to go in with the same marker and pull up from the bottom just for some very slight shading. So now for the goggles, I'm going around the outside edge with a pink color. And then I'm going to do the strap, a darker pink color, more of a red. And then for the glass part, I have a very pale blue. I went all over with that blue. And then I'm going to go in with a pale green on one side, and then a slightly darker blue on the other, and blend those together. And I think it kind of gives it that sort of mirrored look that you see some skiers and snowboarders have with their goggles. Now I can finish off by coloring in my trees, and I'm just using 2 shades of green. I'm going to go in with the lighter green, then bring in the darker green underneath, and then go back in and blend that out. You can also, I discovered coloring all these trees, go in and do the dark first, just right underneath each little level, and then blend that out with the light, and that worked just as well, and it was one less step to do. So you can see here, this is what I'm doing. I'm going with dark first. I did the dark on all those, and then I can go in with the light green. And then finally, I'm going to give them a little bit of rosy cheeks with an R12. So I use the coordinating dies to cut out all my pieces, and I'm just going to set those aside. And now it's time to start on the back panels for all our little scenes. So I've cut out some mermaid cardstock with the square that comes with the Flippin Awesome. This is what each of our little scenes is going to be on. And just to define the edges a little bit more, I'm going to go in with a blending brush and some mermaid ink and just darken the edges a little bit. So I'll do this on all 4 panels. So that they all match. And then I'm also going to do it on this white piece. So because that white piece to the right where you saw I put my hand, that part's going to be seen, I wanted it to match. So I'm just coloring the edges with that same mermaid ink and just going a little bit darker so it matches my paper pretty well. Now you could cut this mechanism out of that mermaid cardstock, but it actually moves a lot better with the 80-pound cardstock than it does with the 100 pounds. So I always cut it out of the Nina White. And then this is just a good way to make your color consistent across all your panels. And you'll see here when we assemble it just exactly what I'm talking about. I did put that piece of tape there to protect the rest of it so that I can easily stick my panels down and it all stays nice and clean and white. Sometimes I have some trouble sticking things down when I've put ink on it because it doesn't dry fast enough. This way I don't have to worry about that. Now to add some snow, I'm just going to use some white watercolor, and I just got it all soupy there with the water, and then I'm just going to pick some up and flick it onto my backgrounds. And then I'm also going to use the liquid stardust. I've added it to some water in this little spray bottle, but instead of spraying, I'm just going to take the top off and use the tube inside as my way to flick just a few of the sparkly droplets onto the backgrounds as well. So this will just be clear water, which will kind of react with the ink slightly, not too much, because there's not a lot of ink on there, but it'll give some nice sparkly splotches as well. I'm going to go ahead and dry these with a heat tool so I don't have to wait, and I can make sure they're nice and dry when I start to assemble my pieces. Now to do the snow, I cut 2 of those squares out of the sparkle cardstock, and I only cut 2 just to maximize my cardstock usage, because you're going to have a hill on the bottom of each of these, so really you can cut 2 hills out of 1 piece, as you'll see here. So that can kind of keep you from wasting too much of that sparkle cardstock. So I'm just using the different stitched hill sides, and I'll just hold that in place with a little bit of washi tape while I cut it through. Now you can see this is the leftover piece, and I can use that for the hill on my next panel. So he's going to kind of be going up the hill on his snowboard, so you can see I'm positioning it to where that hill sort of goes up on the right side there. The hill on the 3rd panel, he's going to be up in the air, so we just want it along the bottom in some form, and I'm trying to vary the hill so it's different, kind of like he's moving across the terrain. And then for the last one, I want it to be a little higher because I'm going to use the sandy beach accents to cut some little slits for all his stuff to get tucked into. So I'm going to pick the longest one with all those kind of bumps in it. That's going to go along the bottom, and then I'm going to pick a smaller one for the top. Which I'm having trouble getting off this magnet. So I'm going to line this one up close to the bottom and hold that in place. And then I'll put the other one a little closer to the top. The one on the top is the one that the Yeti is going to go in. And then on the bottom, I'm going to have a couple different items in there. So you want it kind of close to the top, but give yourself enough space to where you're not cutting off the top. Now I can start assembling all the panels. So I'm just going to go through and glue that sparkly cardstock snow to the bottom of each of these. And I'm keeping them in order so I don't get messed up. But it also helps you kind of see how the terrain changes from panel to panel. Now for this one, I'm making sure the glue is just on the edges. and then kind of along the top of those openings. I don't want it on the bottom because I want to slide things down into those slits that I've created. All right, now to assemble. So these first two little guys, they're going to have their goggles on. So I'm going to go ahead and put those on. And you can see I'm going to lay out my pieces on the panels where they go. So the popsicle without the bite, that's the first panel. Then he gets distracted while he's snowboarding, taking a bite of the popsicle, and then crashes in the end. And this is sort of based on true events, possibly. I did used to snowboard. I wasn't very good, but I would much rather stay on the bunny slope than go on a lift, but I did go on the lift one time, and I pretty much face planted off of it. So I wasn't trying to do a really cool trick on my snowboard like this guy, but I did land face first in the snow. So that is what inspired this card. So there's the first panel done. Everything's peachy keen. So on my next panel, and you can see I'm going ahead and putting him on the snowboard so he's kind of all one piece. He's going to be going up the hill. He's already taken a bite of that popsicle there. And then this is where things start to go horribly wrong. And you can see I am trimming off whatever piece goes past the edge of that panel. That way it'll still flip very well. Yeah, he's gone crazy. He's flying through the air. So all these little pieces kind of make this more dynamic are going off the side of the panel. Things are going nuts. We're just going to trim off those pieces so our panel is still square. And then finally, he lands face first in the snow. And I did have to cut him off and work with it a little bit to figure out how much to trim off to get him in the snow. But once I got it turned off or cut off, he fits in there quite nicely. You could also fit these in before gluing this down if you needed to. So there he is, falling in the snow. Now to finish off, I'm going to use some Spiffy Speckles paper in the aqua speckles on the white to make the panel on the end where my sentiment will go. And I'm also going to use the purple with purple speckles for the background. So these are both add-on pieces to the Flippin Awesome die. You can see I've cut that white out of the stitch square that fits on that end panel, and then the purple is the scallop that will go behind. So in order to make sure that my sentiment is in the right place when I stamp it on here, I'm going to kind of partially assemble things here a little bit. So first I'm going to start by putting the images that I want on this end panel onto the end panel so that I can trim them off along the edge, because once it's glued down, that will kind of be hard to do. So, you know, he landed in the snow, but he's okay, and his popsicle survived. So he's going to be off the bottom down here, kind of popping up out of the snow. And then our sentiment will go to the left. So I'll just trim his feet off so that the panel is flush on the bottom. You can see I actually cut this piece out of a 12 by 12 piece. So you can use a 12 by 12 piece, or you could use the 6 by 6 pad. So now I'm going to fold my Flippin Awesome mechanism around and make sure all my folds are nice and creased, and that way it will work properly. And once it's folded like this, you can kind of see that things are going to tuck in there, and that's why you need to put the panel on before you do the stamping. So I'm going to go ahead and just adhere my last panel first. It goes right on that white square you see there. And I'm going to use some Tombow Extreme adhesive because I want to make sure these stick really well. And I'll also use the double-sided tape on the other ones you'll see here in just a little bit. So you're just going to line that last panel up onto the white square that this mechanism creates. And then this is going to slide underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere that one down as well. And really the key to this is to make sure the top, the bottom, and the right side are evenly spaced on that panel, because that's the part you're going to see. So you can see that you wouldn't want to stamp your sentiment on that panel before you did this, because you might have it centered too far to the left and it might get hidden. So that's why I went ahead and put these pieces on here. So this is going to say, have a really cool holiday. So I'm just going to kind of figure out where I want those pieces to be. And obviously this is going to be towards the top because it's longer and it's going to overlap over the Yeti's head. And I decided to stamp them individually rather than stamping all the words at the same time, because then I could kind of squeeze them a little bit closer. But they definitely fit if you just want to stack them. And I also wasn't quite sure if I wanted them all to line up along one side or all be centered, so that's why I'm stamping them individually. Alright, now that that is in place and stamped down, I can assemble the rest of my pieces. And I'm just using the double-sided tape here so that I don't have to worry about an adhesive runner not getting lined up with the sides or going over it, causing some stickiness that might stick out from behind my panel that would get caught on things, because you want this to run nice and smooth. So I feel like with the tape, you have a little more control over where that adhesive is going. So that's why I decided to use the tape for these little skinny parts where these other panels are going to attach. And you're just going to line it up with the left side of each square. And then there's all the pieces together. So now I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive to those tiny little flaps that wrap around the back. This is the only part that attaches to the card. So you want to make sure you're using a good strong adhesive for this part. And then I'm going to center it up on this decorative back panel that I cut from the purple spiffy speckles. And that just brings in the purple that is in the popsicles in each of the little seams that we have here. Just going to make sure both those tabs are nice and stuck down. You can see how that operates perfectly. So now to add the little pieces that I cut out for the pull tab. This is also from the add-on set, and these are cut out of peacock cardstock. And I'm just putting one on each side to kind of finish it off. If you have trouble with the mechanism going back in with a piece on the back side because it gets caught, you can leave that part off. But I just think this finishes it off really nicely when the whole panel is pulled out. So you can see I kind of bend the tab up just slightly so you can get your finger under there and grab it and pull it. So now I'm going to put everything onto a mermaid card base. And this is a standard size card base right now, which you could leave it on and you could stamp something underneath it, or you could put a little detail on the bottom. But I'm just going to trim it off so that it fits the same proportion of the scalloped rectangle that's the background. So this is just me figuring it out, where to cut it, how much to cut off. So now that I know how much to cut off, which is it, 1/2 inch, looks like. Yeah, because it's normally 4 1/4, and I got it at 3 3/4. So I've got some strips I can use for some sentiments later, but now that is evenly spaced all the way around the purple rectangle. And I can just go ahead and glue that down to the card base. I like to use liquid glue for this because it means to me that it is nice and stuck down, and that tape runner adhesive is not going to let go anytime soon, because you're going to be pulling on this to make it work, so you want to make sure you have something that's not going to come apart in the future. Sometimes I have trouble with tape runners wanting to let go. So I'm just going to make sure that it's nice and stuck down. You can put your hand underneath there since it's only held down with the tabs. You can also open the card and put pressure that way, which I do pretty often. And then here is the finished card. So he's snowboarding, gets out of control into the snow. I just think it's super fun. And now you know that I have also fallen in the snow. So there you have it. Here is the finished card and all these cute little panels telling the story. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.